I work with startups, so I love the energy.
Oh, your clients are startups?
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah, it gets addictive.
It is. I love it.
Yeah,
It's like the highs and the lows.
for sure.
Welcome to the Automate and Grow podcast, brought to you by Cloud Advisory.
Let's do an intro here real quick, and then we probably are wasting good content yet again. So,
Yeah, let's get rolling.
all right, this is another episode of the Automate and Grow podcast. I'm here with Kelly Sarabyn from 2K North, as opposed to K2 North.
Yes, that's an important distinction. That's another firm we don't want to send business to.
No, so 2K North needs your business, not K2 North. We don't even know who that is.
It's probably no one. Or a robot.
Oh, it might be. I mean,
It sounds like a robot.
Yeah, K2 North.
K2D2 or something.
I think K2 is actually a robot in Rogue One.
Isn't it? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. We'll look it up when we're done here. So I reached out to Kelly because, she is in the throes right now of her own agency startup. So I figured this is the opportunity to help document that journey and get a peek under the hood. And we had a non-starter conversation last week that spiraled off into way more interesting content that we're going to talk about. So unfortunately, that is
future of society and those type of issues.
Yeah, I start connecting dots and it gets out of control. So thank you for joining me, Kelly.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be on. I'm excited to talk about the birth of an agency.
It is, right? It's the birth of an agency. And you're in like Philadelphia area, right?
Yeah, I'm right outside of Philadelphia, proper. And I was a partner at another agency. And I decided I wanted to be more of an entrepreneur, have more of the ownership role and more of the control. So
you're taking a big sigh of like, why am I doing this? What was I thinking?
I was just thinking about the flip side, the responsibility, but no, I love it. And I have a business partner who has a sales background, so I have more of a product background.
Okay.
Overseeing the creative team, the production of the branding and the content. And she has a sales background and a social media background. So
good fit. We
decided to merge our skills, and she had someone that she'd worked with for a long time in India who is an expert in sort of technical SEO, and he develops websites, and he actually has a whole team in India who can ramp immediately up to do as many websites as we need, and he also has a team of designers.
Oh, great. So, yeah, it always helps to have remote teams when you're doing this sort of thing. So I think the first place I'd like to start with you is, what was motivating you to go out on your own?
That's a good question. And to be completely honest, I think part of it was, I was working at another agency and they had a particular product. So they were doing branding, but then the way that they were sort of helping to implement the branding was to provide sort of strategy advice in all these different domains. So like, here's your social media strategy based on your branding. Here's your visual strategy based on your branding. And what I found and discovered is that that's tough. We were working with startups who were funded, so they did have resources, but even funded startups, some of them had tens of millions of dollars of funding, but they were still in that mindset of like all hands on deck. Everybody's working all the time. You're trying to put a fire out here, put a fire out there, develop the strategic partnership. They really needed more, I thought, tactical help. So the branding element was important and good, but they needed really hands-on help in getting that executed.
Okay.
So a big part of it was, I really wanted to be offering a different product than what we were offering. And so I knew if I went out on my own, then I would be able to sort of
You have the
shape.
power to
Yeah, the
shape.
power to offer that.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm someone who's like really motivated by providing true value. Like, some people are like, oh, I gotta make more money, I gotta scale at all costs. But to me, um, for my work life, I need to feel like I'm actually helping people, and helping them on their way and providing real value. So I think that was probably the largest impetus in me saying, all right, I'm just going to launch my own thing.
So, are you then focused, it sounds like, on founder-led companies and funded startups?
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to do is sort of become that outsourced CMO for startups who are funded, but I would say early stage Series A funding. I think once a company has 50 plus employees, unless they're in kind of a manufacturing space, they usually have the money to have an internal CMO, which obviously that's the best of both worlds, right? If you can have someone highly skilled and highly qualified and they're all about your company and only about your company, then that's great. But what I saw is a lot of startups were hiring like one junior marketer and asking them to do everything.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, right?
Right?
So then
Because
there's a
that's all they could
gap.
afford, and they were like, "Oh, I want someone on my team to be fully, committed," which the person often could be. But then they were trying to do landing pages, trying to do social media, trying to do digital ads, trying to come up with a brand, and maybe they knew about one of those areas.
Right.
And so they were often overworked, overwhelmed, and also not honestly doing that good of a job. Because
Yeah,
they
it's tough, right?
know.
Like if especially if you're getting like someone, it's their first or second gig, or they're
Mhm.
not really used to operating at a C level where there's strategy before execution.
Exactly, which was mostly the case because that's what people could afford to pay. If you're not going to pay the upper level salary, then you're not going to get the experience. So we're seeking to try to convince and persuade startups, say, hey, you're at this stage of growth. This is how much money you have. Pay us. We have all these, distributed experts that can be working on multiple projects. So you get the expertise for the same or less than you would pay this junior marketer who might, with benefits, cost you 70 grand a
Right.
year. It's not cheap.
No,
So
it's not. I mean, as soon as you take that on, and you're probably not. I like the concept of fractional, right? So like the concept of fractional CMO, fractional CTO, especially for those stages.
mhm.
What sort of, are you breaking out with like specific clients in hand, or are you kind of starting from scratch?
So, as we knew we were going to launch, and I sort of told my last agency I was leaving, we,
Mm.
through personal connections, we started working on two clients. And one of
Oh,
them
great.
is a high-end sunglasses company that's going to come to market in March. So she already has the product ready, and I did the branding for her, and we're
Oh,
helping
great.
her do the social and content. And then we officially started looking for clients this month, and surprisingly, I thought, not having a sales background, and maybe this was beginner's luck, but I was like, sales is going to be the challenge, like
Yeah.
figuring out. And I still think, so just through networking online, honestly, we were able to get 5 or 6 clients, and they're early stage, so we'll see. I mean, if a couple of them are in the process of getting funding, so we'll see if they're able to. In which case, we're hoping that we're now positioned to be that outsourced CMO. But that's not really scalable. Sort of. I mean, it could be through referrals and relationships, but I think the cold process of like doing whether it's the cold emails or figuring out what works in in sort of scaling the sales process. That's something we're starting to just sort of dip our toes in. So I sort of wrote the first email nurture sequence. I'm gonna close this.
Is your video games a rebellion?
It was just my Slack, which, also might
Oh.
take over the world in 5 years.
It's funny. Like I've
Not as fun as video games, but
yeah, I'm not a video game person, but I'm also not a big Slack guy. I've always had a challenge getting on that. But
did you?
well, we use it for clients, but it's more. I don't know. I mean, I introduced you to that one Slack community, which is
Oh
online,
yeah.
courses, right? And that's grown really well. And I think there's a lot of value there. And there's a lot of those external type um, groups that kind of create like a community around it, which is cool. I don't know why. I think it's the threaded nature that throws me a little bit, and maybe all the hashtags. But.
Yeah, I don't, and also I just feel like it's supposed to simplify and make everything easy, but also being in multiple workspaces, like I don't,
That throws me a
it's
little bit.
not great. Yeah, I
Mm.
get what you're saying. And their recent rebrand, I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh yeah, they changed their whole aesthetic, which
Oh, really? So you
yeah,
need to go talk to
people are
them.
trashing it because they said it looks like the Nazi symbol, I believe.
Oh my God.
And I also saw, I think
You know
a
what
duck
happens when you
orgy.
think about
Someone
Nazis all the
said
time? You see
a
them.
duck orgy, which once
What?
they said that, I saw what they were saying.
A dog orgy? Wait, I need to
Duck
find
orgy,
a duck orgy.
like 4 ducks on top of each other.
Black rebrand. Let's look at this
Yeah, check it out.
black rebrand. Ooh, this looks, I don't know what's going on.
It's interesting because I'm like, they spent a lot of money to do this, and I thought they had good branding. They had very friendly. Yeah, not good, right?
I mean, that doesn't
It's
make
not
it.
horrible, but to me, it wasn't an improvement.
I think that this is like the least Nazi looking symbol I've ever seen, but
Yeah, I didn't see that. But when someone said duck orgy, do you see what they're talking about?
yeah. Or it more looks like when you go to the fair and there's ducks that are following each other around.
Well, that's the
See,
more
there's a
friendly,
client for you,
child
Kelly. You need to
child
like
friendly
reach out to
version.
Slack. It's like you can see evil in everything. How do you see evil in ducks? These are new, like people need to like reorient their brains a little bit. So when you've got a startup and it's really tough unless you have a lot of money to build your own brand. What's your kind of feeling like when people think of your company? Are they buying into the personality of you and your co-founder? Like, what's the message?
You mean currently, or what I would aim for?
Yeah, what are you shooting for, and what do you think's connecting with people short term? Because
I think in the short term, it's definitely just me and my co-founder. Like they're connecting with us personally, and I think that's the approach. And I think this is a luxury you have. Like I don't feel the need to have um, an income right now, which I think is a luxury not everyone.
wow,
I want an income, just like
damn, I need to
everyone
move to
else.
Philadelphia.
But my husband's very supportive, and he's
Okay.
Philly is very affordable to California. That's a big
Well,
difference. I will
it's
say.
interesting because I mean, I've said, there's a few people now that I know are in your area, and I just think it's such a lower cost of living.
It
It,
is. And
it
it makes a huge difference, right? Like even
for
compared to
sure.
Washington D.C. and New York, I mean, the housing here is about a third of what it
Wow.
is there. So honestly, I mean, that takes a lot of the pressure off because I think people who are like, I immediately need to be making, what I was making before or having
Sure.
this come in, that puts a lot of pressure on you. And unfortunately, I think it sort of makes it where you can't build relationships as organically necessarily because your immediate need to close the deal and your kind of sales mindset comes through to people, which is, I think in today's day and age, people aren't maybe always, but not very receptive to that. So,
Interesting. That desperation thing, which I'm not saying it, well, I'm not saying it, and I mean, it's true, right? Like there's urgency sometimes around money, and that's just the reality. And I think the smaller you are, the more you individually feel that, right? So it's,
and it's tough because people can kind of pick up on that, and it's not
sure.
a good,
And they're like not going to help you. They're not going to help you resolve it. It's like, well, thanks. You're going to take my money and then you're going to be gone. You can't
yeah,
even deal with
exactly.
your own stuff, right? But it's true. I mean, it's a reality of a startup, and it's kind of tricky. So
Yeah, so I think that, for us, like the fact that we're not like, oh, we need to be, and the other thing is, so now that we surprisingly do have money coming in, I think that we can reinvest it in the business and building the brand. So to me, that's like something where, that's sort of a longer term proposition, which I think is true of any startup where you sort of, I have this vision of being like the outsourced CMO, and
Right.
really also the sort of being very nimble and agile and sort of meeting startups where they are with their resources, and saying, okay, look, being honest and saying, this is a compromise. You really should do, say, this elaborate branding first, but you don't have
Right.
the money. So I'm going to like do my best for you in 2 hours and hack it for you. And I feel like being honest and being really forthright about, because I think in this space of marketing and branding, there's a lot of snake oil being sold,
For sure.
which is tough because I think part of the problem is the buyers don't know what they're looking at. So they don't know if somebody tells them, hey, this cost per click on Google Ads of $7 is an amazing deal for your space. And, in some spaces, in some terms, maybe
That's actually pretty cheap.
it just depends what a term is, right?
Yeah.
But like a lot of times the buyers aren't in a position to know. So
Guess it depends on a lot of factors, but
exactly, which is the truth, right? But like I think it makes for sort of an interesting market for us as like to try to sell when there's so much when the buyer doesn't necessarily in the position to adjudicate these things, and you have a ton of players, a ton of people. You have bigger agencies, you have middle agencies,
right.
small agencies, you have individuals who are doing just selling directly as consultants basically.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, how is there like a big startup market like around where you are? Or is it just like I'm getting lucky and meeting people from there?
So not all our clients are even in Philadelphia, but I think that,
Oh, okay. I mean,
and at my last agency, most of our clients weren't in Philadelphia, but there
okay.
is a growing scene here. And, my old agency, they were not at all interested in trying to like really get into that scene. But,
Mm-hmm.
I've been talking to a local startup, and I think that, especially because there's a huge healthcare presence here. There's a lot of
Oh, really?
like
Okay.
GlaxoSmithKline's here. Like there's a lot of and there's a lot of hospitals like the University of Pennsylvania, Thomas Jefferson. So sort of around that, there's been sort of a lot of health startups, but it's definitely not New York or Silicon
Sure.
Valley or San
Yeah. Those
Francisco
are like crazy.
or even Austin, probably.
Austin, right? Austin's
Austin's
got a market.
right now.
Yeah, there's another market I was thinking of, but I'm not really into it. So, but Boston even I think apparently has a really strong startup. There's a lot of stuff around MIT, and there's guys that are venture capitalists there, and there's money, and that's half the battle, right? That's part of it.
That is, yeah, a lot of the money.
LA,
Yeah,
LA is like crazy. I think a lot of startup stuff's happening in LA. I always have a hard time. It's got its own flavor in LA, but there is stuff going on here. Like I realize some of it's out of media and entertainment. So there's some VR and AI stuff, and there's actually some esports stuff. I always call it e-gaming, which is not right, but
don't they have Silicon Beach down there, which is
they
like
do.
the hotbed of where startups are?
Yeah, so if you go down to like Santa Monica, for sure, there's like a lot of stuff going on down there. And even in Orange County, I'm getting the impression there's a lot going on. Like there's money here, right? So there's definitely a lot of like pharma stuff, and I'm newly back in SoCal full time from after kind of splitting time for 2 years between LA and New York, which was kind of crazy, but
that is intense.
But it was great because I got to see both sides. The travel was a little nutty, but it's I'm just starting to feel like settled, so I'm trying to get plugged back into
the scene.
There seems to be a lot going on. Like I just you got to get your head wrapped around it a little bit.
Would you say there was like a different mentality from the LA startups to the New York, or was it so it wasn't just the like verticals that they were focusing on? There's like a different mindset.
I think it's a lot to do with the verticals. Like LA, there's startups that I would never I guess there's two ways that I look at them. It's like, wow, that's really interesting. I never would have thought of that. And I guess I look at it and I go, is it niche, or is it like a truly $1 billion thing? And it might be a billion. There's a lot of them that probably are $1 billion things that are just not my area of expertise. Maybe, and I don't know what it is. I think it's partially because some of the money comes from entertainment. So there's that element. But there are software startups. It's just, I'm trying to put my thumb on it when I'm here. It's a little different. And I think Orange County to Santa Monica is also very different. But there's stuff going on, and I just look at those companies sometimes and I'm like, they're not really business to business startups. So maybe that's because, it's a lot of consumer stuff, or it's stuff that's very digital. Like it's like straight up AI serving a component of another digital market. So I see that. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on. Like if you look in built in LA, and it's, there's a lot of people hiring, and there's a lot of money that's going to startups for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I think that for me, I like local clients. Like I think that for me, the in-person interaction, I mean, you can just build those relationships
yeah.
so much better.
I
So
agree. Yeah.
I have a strong preference for that personally. I mean, I will work with someone remotely, and like I said, at my last agency, that was the vast majority of our clients. But I just think you can build such a strong bond when you are able to meet in person, and you're able to go see, where they're working, what they're doing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So in 2019, I have kind of this idea of doing these meetups around the concept of a Keiritsu. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So in Japanese business, a Keiritsu is where they dominated business for a long time, and they probably still technically do, where there was a conglomerate of cooperative businesses. So they're probably like in different industries, but they had common banking relationships. It was very complex for these large corporations. But my concept is really more around your allies and your alliances. So I kind of have this idea that you need 20 or 30 of these really, kind of formal relationships with other companies that are going to support your journey, and vice versa. So who would be in your Keiritsu? Who do you think like?
I don't know. I feel like I'm just starting to develop those relationships. Like I have a meeting next week with a local sort of social media website design agency. The agency that I used to work at, I still feel like they are an ally of mine, and I'm an ally of theirs. And
That's great.
what's that?
That's great.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's valuable to me. I don't look at and I guess now that you're talking in terms of not even being limited to the industry that we're in, past clients that I sort of wrote the brand story for and helped them, I feel a huge sense of investment in their progress. So 3 or 4 of those companies that I felt like I had a real bond with stick out as companies that I still consider myself affiliated with, even though I don't have like an official relationship with them anymore. But I love that idea, because I think that and now that I've started really more aggressively networking, I really look at fellow marketers and fellow branders and fellow content producers as collaborators and allies rather than competitors, because the market is so vast. So I feel no need to be like, oh, if you get that client, then I'm not going to get it. Like, I don't look at it that way at all.
I think that's a destructive way to think about things, because then you get this win-lose mentality that isn't reality in the market. And I think that's where I kind of have been emphasizing this concept of the Keiritsu, which is like, if you have those alliances, it's not about win-lose, right? It's like, how do I align myself to understand that it's more about having all boats float up, like all boats rise, right? That's kind of the concept.
Anyway. I agree. And I think that's so real. And I love the idea of making that even like more of a formal thing. I think that would be great. I would sign up.
Well, What I'll do, yeah, I've been playing with this for a while. So I'm going to start, I think I'm going to do local Keiritsu meetups, but I'll invite you because I think what people have been talking about, I've shared that idea and I did one, I've been doing that little 1 minute daily growth show every day, or pretty much every day, like probably about 4 or 5 episodes a week. And the one episode's been really big, which is on forming your own Keiritsu.
Oh yeah, no, it makes sense. I feel like people are looking for that connection.
I think so. And even me, like I know that when I'm looking inward, then my business is shrinking. When I'm looking outward, it's growing. And it's so ironic, right? Like it's just what you focus on. So you want to align yourself with like-minded people. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'll do, kind of LA and OC, like Orange County, Keiritsu meetups. But ultimately, everyone that in my network is not here. And they're all talking about doing one event. So one bigger event. So we can talk about it, but it would be interesting to do like a Philadelphia one. You could probably line up with Dave and Zach and
Yeah, no, and I could bring more people in, like
yeah.
we should
And then we
totally
could
do
all do an event in LA or something.
that.
Like, I don't know,
That
maybe
would be awesome.
April or May or something. You're semi-invited. I don't know the date, but
Well, I'll harass you on LinkedIn if I don't get an invitation.
yeah, let's do it. I'm putting the idea out there. Let's all do it.
I think it's great.
So it's great that you've got like you've got some allies and alliances. You've got a good support system where you are. It sounds like you got a good partnership set up where there's a delineation of skill sets. Where do you want your company to go? Like, what's your vision for it, and who would be the next ideal client for you?
The next ideal client, for me, it would probably be a B2B tech client that was recently funded with around $5 million.
Yeah, well,
and didn't have a marketer, didn't have a founding marketer person. I think that would be my ideal client. I'm super nerdy and wonky on a personal level, so I like the B2B space.
Yeah, I gravitate to it too, so I understand that. There's a frivolity in my brain, I think, somewhere back here that says B2C. What is that? But those are the cool things. I mean, I just think my experience and skill set might be like yours, where it's like I'm comfortable with B2B. It's not easy, it's a process.
No, it's not easy, but I like that. I like the challenge. I love learning about new things. I had a client that was a NoSQL database.
Oh yeah.
It's called Redis Labs.
Yep.
And when I started the engagement, I didn't even know what a NoSQL database was. but I loved learning, and I love learning about the industry. I think it's great.
I've tried getting my head wrapped around some of those things. Like we develop stuff, but it's like I had clients from almost like a strategy biz dev, and they're very technical, and they don't have like a business co-founder. And I was like, I can't help you. I have no idea how to. I kind of intellectually know you need to go build like a developer network and get into these guys to build mind share. But I'm like, I don't think this is my jam.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I think a lot of times the technical side and the product side generally, people get really bogged down in the details and sort of the features and the benefits and all those specifics, which is good. You need to know those things and you need to be able to communicate them. But I think the value of having an outsider who's not even an expert in those details can see the higher level messaging, the higher level branding, and get a better sense of sort of the emotional side of things. Because I think especially in B2B, people forget that the buyer is a person and you are solving like a real issue, whether it's like you're going to make they're going to be able to sell better, they're going to be more organized, their life's going to be calmer, they're going to have more control. I think control is often a big thing. But these are like emotional things. And I think it's easy to, especially very techie people, to lose sight of that human side. So that's why I think marketers can come in and often be like, there is an emotional story here.
It's interesting because like another podcast, and actually a guest on this podcast was the founder of Penji, he's actually he's in Camden, New Jersey, actually. Yeah, I always think he's Philadelphia, but he's not, which is Jonathan Griesbowski. And he does his podcast around, and one of the things that he talks about is how you found, or how do you get your first 100 customers? Because that's, what the business of Penji has been focused on, is getting their first 100 true customers and then beyond. And it's almost like we have this concept of automation for everything, and I'm the guy that wrote about that. But if you read it, even just read what I wrote, which is really saying, whoa, you're not ready for that. So I think we forget, to your point, these are people behind this, and we have to make those human connections, right? We can hide behind our laptop and campaigns and ads, and I'm guilty of it sometimes. It's like, oh, I just want to like find those people, but in the end, that human connection is a big deal, right?
Oh yeah, I think so. And I think you can, the automation and sort of all this stuff works best if you start with a human connection and you can sort of infuse it into that. I think that is the way that stuff is ultimately, for the long term, the most effective, but they are tools. And so I think, you can say the same for marketers. They really can get bogged down in like, oh, the cost per click, I want to get it, and like really the audience targeting to get it as custom as, but you can get lost in, those things are important.
It's true, right? Like, I think we all get stuck in this game of, it becomes like a game in some ways, and you're trying to hack it and reverse engineer it, and you're thinking scale, but in the end, like how you get those first, whether it's 10 or 100 customers, I think you're right. Like, I think it's got to be a human connection. And from there, you have the stories, the stories of solution, testimony, and transformation that might give you the stuff you need to scale those technical elements, right? But that's it's interesting you say that. So.
Yeah, and I think too, like how, businesses and brands get that organic word of mouth where they have customers really, not just continuing to use the product themselves, but liking it and loving it so much that they're passing it on to others, which is free, right? Like if you get to the point where you have that, you're not paying for a digital ad at that point. So I think that really comes from making that human connection and that emotional connection, and not just from the fact that you had the big orange button and got someone to click on it because it's effective on a psychological level.
Yeah, no, totally. Especially if you're in the B2B space, that gets challenging. I think if you don't have those connections, it's real tough, especially if you're navigating a more complex sale, figuring out what goes from someone that's unknown to known to marketing qualified, ready to talk to you, it's no laughing matter.
No, it's not.
You get stuck at any one of those, and you can bypass all of that by a referral or by a relationship, right? So it's kind of, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a tough balancing act probably for when you're early. And I still go through it. It's, how do we get beyond that though? I guess. I don't know if you have
yeah, and I think it's different in every industry and in every case. So it is really, I do think being nimble and like being willing to pivot and really not putting all your eggs in one basket. I think you kind of always need to be attentive to both sides of sort of the strategy and the tactic side, and
for sure,
see where you land.
So what are you excited about for the next 12 months?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm most excited, I think, about meeting new clients and meeting new business owners and founders. I think that right now, and this might change as we grow and evolve as an agency, but like when I look at sort of the clients we have and the proposals that we currently have out, it's really all over the place. Like we have a couple B2C, we have a tech app. I think that we recently got into contact, or actually my co-founder was contacted online through some group she's in, someone who runs like a whole series of reptile conferences across the country. And he's looking to up his marketing. And I was like, I love it. I love it.
Do not suggest like a panda as their mascot.
No, I don't think that would be the right branding, but I don't know yet. This is
Or
all
like
early stages.
any sort of like thing they would eat. Don't do that. What's your mascot? It's a cricket.
That's likely to appeal to the mass audiences. People love crickets.
Yeah.
Better than roaches, anyway.
Oh my God, yeah. No, roaches are, despite, rumors to the contrary, they're not like land lobsters. They're not like, nobody likes roaches.
No, but they are very persistent, and they they will out survive humans.
For sure. Let's just leave it at that.
Probably shouldn't have said that. But yeah, so I think that's what I'm most excited about, is the potential of, learning about new companies and meeting new people.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you have any plans to do any, like, what's your strategy for, I guess, your own content and outreach that way?
Yeah, so I think, I'm a very prolific writer. So I think in the short term, I will be writing probably one original blog a week, I would imagine.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and just promoting that. I do think we would be interested in doing a webinar probably around, branding. And I would be interested in launching some kind, I don't know if it would be a podcast or sort of an Instagram style profile of potentially female founders. I think that's an interesting niche right now in terms of, obviously my partner and I are both females.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's definitely like, it's relatable, right? I mean, you guys are out there, and that's an easy way to build alliances and allies, right? Is like, there's a commonality there, so that, builds rapport. And
I think so. And there's like a common, obviously most money currently, most funding goes to male founders, and most people pitching are still male. So I think there is. Yeah, so I think there's. What's that?
You could be a big fish in a smaller pond. Like, hopefully that changes, and I realize that there's just probably demographic differences there, but you probably have a huge opportunity, I would think.
Yeah, and I mean, this would just be like a content marketing thing. We're not going to brand our agency around one demographic, but I think that,
I mean, some people have, right?
Yeah, no, I know there's a agency out there that's like a social media agency that's all women and all about women.
But that doesn't have to be your interest. Like, you don't have to do that, but it could be effective part of it.
Yeah, I think anytime you have like a smaller community within a larger community, you're saying there's a potential for that like alliance and that close networking and building. So, I'm also very interested in social impact companies, like for-profit social impact companies. That's another sort of niche of startups that I think I would like to move into. But, at this point in our evolution, I'm not ready to like niche down in that way. Yeah. So, those are like, we both have personal interests in that space. So it's something I could see down the line if it seemed like there was enough traction around those things that we would maybe move into it as more aggressively.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, listen, I don't want to take up a lot of your time. We've talked for a while, and I'm sure we can keep going, but I'll wrap up with two things. The first one is, how are you, Kelly, changing the world?
How am I changing the world? That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
I mean, you don't have to be, but.
Well, I wish I was changing the world. I think I'm currently making a small impact on the world, but I like to think that I am, on a professional level. I'll keep it professional. On a professional level, I think I'm helping, companies that are adding real value to the world to grow a little faster and make a little bit more traction. And I do see a lot of value
Agreed. That's great.
in that.
That's a huge thing, right? Getting their message out and giving them support in areas where they're weak.
Yeah, and it's because unfortunately, in today's world, maybe always it's not enough to build something great. You actually have to get people to look at it and
Very
consider
true.
it and engage it. So I do think, marketers and branders play that vital role of actually getting things out into the world.
There was a post the other day that that I shared, and it was from Ray Dalio, and he's a very, very, very successful investor, and he's got a very specific philosophy. I don't know if you know Ray Dalio.
I do. I read his book. I like a lot of the things he says.
And he posted this, which was, I'll paraphrase, which is focus more on substance than on show, essentially. And I was kind of like, you know what, but you could be a very competent person, but if nobody knows about it, you're in trouble.
Exactly. I think the people that can be dismissive of marketing and branding as like, oh, you're not contributing real value. But in reality, as you said, if people don't hear about it, they're not drawn into it, and competing for people's attention nowadays is harder than ever. So
oh my God, yeah. Crazy, right?
Competing with all the cat memes.
Well, cat memes are probably even have a hard time. Kelly, I want to thank you for joining me. I'm going to wrap up with one thing, which is when we have interesting guests on, we'd like you to nominate other interesting guests to appear on a future episode of Automate Grow. So who would you suggest that you would like to introduce us to that would be a future guest of the Automate and Grow podcast?
Oh, that's a good one. There was an old client of mine called Stencil, and there was a guy named who was the head of sales and marketing for them. I think he would be very interesting to talk to.
What's his name?
Manny Adiebi.
Whoa, okay, Manny
Adiebi.
I'm gonna have to pronounce his last name over and over until I get it.
Well, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing it, honestly.
Possible. That's like my last name. Everyone pronounces it in America with like Y. It's Deviliano. I'm like, no, it's Italian. You know what? And I just realized before we break that I forgot to ask you about one thing, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I noticed that you attended Yale.
It's true.
And Yale Law School specifically.
That is true.
Did you ever practice law?
So for 2 years, I worked for a free speech organization, and I basically wrote a bunch of law review articles on sort of those type of issues, free speech, right of private conscience. But that was it.
That was it. You just
Yeah.
like, screw this. This is ridiculous.
It was very interesting, but ultimately it's a little dry for me.
Okay.
So that's why I was like, I'm gonna go to
You
something a little
invested
more
all that time.
What's that?
You invested a lot of time.
Oh, I loved it though. It was a great experience. I mean, I met so many interesting people, had so many great conversations. I don't regret it at all. Also, I met my husband at Yale, so.
Oh, there you go. Mission accomplished. What'd you do? I married a Yale guy. Oh, cool. So how does that work? You went through, forgive me for not knowing, but you obviously went through law school. Did you write the bar and become a lawyer, or?
No, so the organization that I worked, because I was doing academic scholarship, they didn't need me to actually take the bar, so I just never took it.
And then it was just,
I thought about it.
Wasn't fun for you. You didn't want to do that long term.
Yeah, if I had stuck with the law, I would have become a law professor. So again, I wouldn't have needed to take the bars. So
nobody needs that.
The bar's a pain in the ass. I mean, it's like a whole day or two of test taking. Like, until I'm going to actually use this, I don't need to take it.
I commend you on your choice of careers. And what was it like going to Yale? Was that like a dream of yours, or why did you go to Yale?
So they are it's very small class, so they only have 180 people, and it's
Oh,
very
wow.
much focused. Yeah, it's nice, and it's very focused on ideas. They do churn out a lot of academics. It's less focused on yeah, I mean, it's less focused on, oh, let's become a corporate lawyer, that then let's talk about politics, let's talk about the Constitution, let's talk about why the Constitution is the way it is. And I really specialized in constitutional law.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think that's why and they didn't have any grades, which was nice,
Wait,
because
what? Like, no, you're in. We're good.
it's basically just
Yeah.
seminars of people
You
talking.
either do or you do not. You either are or are not Yale. So that's really interesting. They don't have grades.
Hmm.
So what's the
And that's,
logic behind that? It's like you're already part of the top 1% of applicants probably because such a small
yeah,
class, right?
it's the hardest school to get into. I mean, I think I think that's the logic, is we're making this very tiny class, and once you're here, we want people to be having um, conversations and be really pursuing what they love. Like, they trust you. They trust that you're
I
capable,
mean,
intelligent. We don't need you competing against each other to
yeah,
get
that's
ahead.
really telling, isn't it? Like I find that interesting because I mean, there's obviously so many things that are screwed up around factory education right now. Like refer it to that, like mass education, right? It's like you're trying to make one size fits all and you're trying to grade everybody and it never is going to be that. So it's kind of interesting to hear that the most elite program, probably, like if I can say that, it's like, so,
In law, yeah, it is.
I mean, that's tough. Like 180 people, there must be tens of thousands of people applying to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely the hardest law school to get into, but I think that it is um
But then they don't
refreshing that
grade.
they
That's
do
amazing. I mean, that's kind of interesting, isn't it?
I think so, and I think it makes for a much more rewarding experience once you're there. And it creates a culture of like, it's a different mindset, when people aren't oh, I have to kill myself to make sure I get this A, or my
Yeah.
GPA is going to go down and then I won't be able to clerk for the Supreme Court.
Well, it sounds like they're trying to help you think.
I think so, and they do a good job of it. I mean, the atmosphere was very open-minded and very thoughtful and very philosophical.
So did they accidentally create an agency owner?
What's that?
Did that methodology accidentally create an agency owner and an entrepreneur?
Me,
Like, I've
meaning
been thinking
me.
about this for a while, and this is not right. This is not what I want to do. You're
They
right.
have actually a lot of people go on to do different things. People who I had a friend who went on to Hollywood because she wanted to be a screenwriter.
Wow.
So
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like it's still,
and
that's
it's
actually
good.
the
I
way
think
it
it's
should be.
good. It's good to have people in different fields with different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
It opens people's minds.
So
So
your Keiritsu might be phenomenal if you tap into.
oh, it's true. Yeah, I
Like,
mean
wait 1 sec. I'm gonna pull out the Yale phone book. It's very
well,
small.
right. I know. I mean, obviously, it's been 10 years since I was at law school, but like, I looked at my LinkedIn connections and I'm like, wow.
Okay, I'm good.
Politicians, judges,
Right, that's crazy.
puts me to shame.
Really interesting. Yeah, I like it. That's amazing. I mean, that's super powerful, and it seems like it's positively impacted how you view things.
I think so. And honestly, it was the first time in my life I sort of grew up, middle class. And it was interesting because there were a lot of people there that came from, very affluent backgrounds whose parents were like CEOs at a Fortune 50 companies.
Sure.
And it was interesting to be exposed to that other side of society,
Yeah,
which I
interesting.
otherwise might not have been.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I think it's really interesting. So congratulations on not becoming a lawyer. Managing to get into the best law school ever. So that's great.
Thank you.
That's a pivot.
It was a pivot. I'm all about pivoting.
I love it. There you go. I think that's like validation of your approach with companies. If you're ready to pivot, I'm ready to pivot. Whatever we decide, we're going to change it. Well, Kelly, I want to thank you very much for joining me. This has been a lot of fun and really interesting. I hope we'll get to chat again.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And we can do it like a Philadelphia area Keiritsu.
Yes, I will spearhead that.
Love it. You have a chapter leader. Perfect.
Exactly. Franchise it.
All right. Well, this has been another exciting edition of the Automate and Grow podcast with another interesting guest. And we hope you'll join us in the next edition of Automate and Grow.
This has been an episode of the Automate and Grow podcast. Check out other episodes for interesting topics on how to grow, innovate, and automate your business.